Good evening, friends. I am Maheshwaran, Chartered Accountant, now co-opted member of Ethical Standards Committee of SIRC. I am the moderator of this session. First of all, I would like to thank Southern India Regional Council of ICAI for giving me this honor and opportunity to moderate a very important session for the whole of profession, whether small, medium, anything. And as a routine for this season, I will just tell you, as I am sitting alone, I am not wearing mask. I hope all of you are sitting alone. If not, please wear mask. So today, the important topic on company law mandatory compliances for private limited companies as well as public limited companies is going to be handled by an eminent and expert speaker, CSA Mohan Kumar. I am glad to introduce the speaker like this. So the profile of Mr. CS Mohan Kumar. A. Mohan Kumar is a law graduate, practicing company secretary and cost accountant. He is the first rank holder in 4 out of 5 years in Trichy Law College, 1988 to 93. He has more than 20 years of experience as company secretary and legal head in various corporate before starting his own practice at Trichy. At Chennai. He was a regional council member for the term 2015 to 18 in ICSI. He was a treasurer of SIRC of ICSI in the year 2016, secretary in 2017, and vice chairman in 2018. During this period, he was chairman of many subcommittees and has rendered service to the profession, members, and students. He was the chairman of placement committee from 2015 to 2018, and with an able team has helped Team SIRO to conduct many successful placement programs. He got re-elected to the regional council with the highest votes obtained by any council member across India in 2018. He was unanimously elected as chairman of SIRC in 2019. During his term as chairman, Company Secretary's Benevolent Fund special scheme was introduced, and he contributed 2 lakhs to the scheme from his personal capacity. 200 members joined the Company Secretary Benevolent Fund using this scheme. Also, record number of programs were conducted. New speakers were introduced during his chairmanship period. SIRC got many awards in the year 2019. He is a regular speaker in many forums. He is also a founder member of Chennai West Study Circle, which is one of the biggest study circles in India. Other interest, along with his friends, involves in charitable activities for the school and college for children. He is a marathon runner and has run several 10 kilometer and 21 kilometer marathons. He is extremely passionate about fitness and health. He has published Vetri Kodu, Winning Line, a self-improvement book in Tamil. With this, I have great pleasure in introducing a multifaceted professional and successful professional to you to deliberate on the very important subject, which is something like our lifeline. So I hope there are already about 179 attendees, which clearly shows the importance and the keenness of our members to learn. Hope you will be much enriched with knowledge about company law and its compliances. The compliances need not be highlighted because nowadays the late fee and all, it is running into thousands and even lakhs. So everybody would be aware of. So we hope we will have a very knowledge enriching session. With these words, I hand over the session to the speaker, company CSA Mohan Kumar, past chairman ICSI SIRC. Please, sir.
Thank you, sir. Thank you, Mr. Maheshwaran, for the nice words and introduction. First of all, I would like to thank the chairman of SIRC and other regional council members and team ICAI, wonderful staff you have. They all interacted and remained very actively for the last 10 days. So, including technical team and your PDC members. So they were in regular touch. I thank each one of them. And I also thank all the participants for such already 190 numbers, and I understand registration is more than 200. So I try to do the best possible from my side. Friends, the topic is Companies Act mandatory compliances for listed and unlisted companies. That's what we are going to see today, and that's the topic given by the committee to me. So basically, most of the compliances are common for both listed and unlisted companies. For listed companies, there are very few compliances which are exclusive for listed companies from Companies Act point of view. SEBI LODR gives a lot of compliances for listed companies. Today, I am not going to touch upon the SEBI LODR compliances for two reasons. One, the topic given to me is Companies Act compliances. Point number two, the audience being qualified chartered accountants, they will be more concerned, or they would like to know more about the unlisted companies, which they may be handling quite a lot. There are about 8 to 10 companies in India, and every company needs a chartered accountant. Auditor needs to sign, and their balance sheet P&L needs to be filed with NCA, and I think most of the attendees here will be handling private limited companies and unlisted public companies to a large extent. So my discussion will also be predominantly on the compliances of these companies. And of course, as I already mentioned, all these compliances are automatically applicable to listed companies as well. There are very few special compliances for listed companies from Companies Act point of view. For example, proceedings of annual general meeting needs to be filed with ROC, which Companies Act says. So likewise, there are only very handful of special compliances from Companies Act 2013. So other compliances are general in nature. So this is the agenda for today. What is the governing laws and what are the compliances? And think and the types of compliances. I think the second and third is what we are going to discuss quite a bit. And forms. I think forms are MCA forms are one of the pet topic for any company secretary or a governance professional. So we will also discuss finally about some of the regular forms and what are the practical problems that could arise, and where we professionally need to be careful. I'll also share some of my practical experiences. Next, Selva. Kindly move to the next slide. Yeah. See, governing laws is basically Companies Act 2013, and Ministry of Corporate Affairs is the governing body. See, one thing is Companies Act 2013 is vastly different from Companies Act 1956. The practice, the procedure that a professional adopted for complying with the secretarial compliances, it cannot be the same compared to 1956 and 2013, predominantly because 1956 Act is Act driven. Most of the thing is available in the Act itself. If you take the paragraph, read the Act, understand the provision, then you will be able to do. Whereas Companies Act 2013, here this is similar to something like your service tax or something, where there is an Act, then there is rules. I think 40 to 50% procedural aspects are covered only in the rules, and there are various amendments, notifications, various notifications, amendments which are being issued. Secretarial standards are there. So if you have, for example, if it is a board meeting, you have to comply with the board meeting. You have to read what is given in that, what is given in the rules, amendment notifications, secretarial standards, and you have to do a consolidated view. And that is why I am saying what is the procedure in 1956 and 2013 varies to a great extent. And I must also say Companies Act is slowly and steadily, it has become a expertise. It is lot of expertise is required to comply with the requirements of the Companies Act. So yeah, listed companies need to comply with the regulations given in the SEBI LODR. So that's what I said. Anyhow, we are not going to deal with the SEBI LODR compliances because that itself is a separate topic which can be covered as a separate topic. Yeah, next. Yeah. So we are not going to deal much about the incorporation. Briefly here and there we will be touching upon the incorporation. We will be talking about post-incorporation compliances. Once a company is incorporated, what are the immediate compliances required for a private limited company, predominantly companies incorporated? And then we will also look at annual compliances. One more thing is there are some half-yearly compliances also under Companies Act now. So we will look at that also. Also, we will look at event-based compliances. For example, a director is appointed, the form to be filed, remuneration, and so likewise allotment, whether it is rights issue or private placement. So what is the compliances? In a very broad manner. I mean, we cannot go into and cover. For example, private placement and rights issue can be discussed as a separate topic. Whereas we will be discussing about it for a few minutes today. So this is the these are the subdivision of topics which we are going to deal. Next. Yeah, once a company is incorporated, there are certain compliances which are very, very important, which we are going to see in the next few slides. These are extremely important because as professionals, we also know there are a lot of players in the market who charge crazy fees like 5,000 rupees, 7,000 rupees for incorporation. They advertise, whereas professionals like chartered accountants and company secretaries, we cannot advertise. Whereas there are people who advertise that we will do everything for 5,000 rupees, 7,000 rupees, and I don't know how they are able to do it, but I can also probably tell there are few occasions where these online people, how they have done incorporation. See, most of you may be knowing up to 15 lakh authorized capital, MCA charges very, very, very nominal fee during incorporation. It's hardly about 300, 400 rupees, including the form fees and stamp duty during incorporation. And you can have your authorized capital up to 15 lakhs. Whereas these lot of online companies, what they do is, for example, if they have, during incorporation, you can even start with the 2,000 rupees as your authorized capital and paid up capital also. So, of course, these people do 20,000 rupees or maximum 1 lakh rupee as the authorized capital, and paid up capital also same. Both authorized and paid up capital is 1 lakh rupees, and they incorporate a company, and they keep the digital signatures also with them. And this 1 lakh limit they reach in a month or two, and when they have to increase the capital, when they approach these online companies, and then they start demanding money. The thing is, see, as a professional, whenever we do incorporation, we always put the maximum limit of 15 lakh as the authorized capital, because let them enjoy the full benefit. Why should we put 1 lakh? And why should we again charge them for increasing the authorized capital? If they don't know it today, tomorrow they will definitely know through another professional. Not only that, it is not a good practice. When a benefit is being given to an entrepreneur through a statute, we must allow them to enjoy it. And so we will do 15 lakh the authorized capital. Only discussion will be on paid up capital, how much you would be able to bring it immediately, 1 lakh, 50,000, whatever be it. But only thing is you must bring that money immediately. So this is what we do. So why I'm trying to emphasize here is these online companies will do an incorporation, and they will simply, many a time they will forget also, because they concentrate on numbers. Incorporate 20 companies, 50 companies today, charge 8,000, make 1 lakh, 1.5 lakh today. So they deal in numbers, quantity. They are not looking at the quality. But once they incorporate a company, there are definitely certain compliances, money to be brought. 20A, very, very important form, certificate of commencement of business to be filed. So all these complaints, the ADT1 for appointment of director. So nothing is being done. And then after a few months, they will look at a chartered accountant for auditing the financials. At that time, if you 6 months would have already elapsed, and the time for filing IMC 20A would have elapsed. There are various cases where we have dealt with such a situation. They are coming after 6 months, and there is no provision. You have to go for an adjudication before ROC. So this is why I say this is an expertise. This is becoming an area of an expertise. Where you have to constantly handhold, guide them on secretarial practices. Because when it goes to adjudication, it's extremely difficult, and you have to pay the penalty, and time, it involves time also. So that's why post incorporation compliance is extremely important. Next slide, please. Yeah. One of the first important complaints for a newly incorporated company is they need to hold the first board meeting within 30 days of incorporation of the company. So there are various businesses which will be taken into account in the first board meeting. Of course, very, very specifically, auditor need to be appointed within 30 days by the board of directors. If not, of course, law always has an exception. If they don't appoint within 30 days, then shareholders can appoint in their general meeting the auditor. So bank account opening, taking note of registered office, if the share capital has come in, taking note of share capital coming in, issue of share certificate. So for considering all these matters, you need to hold the first board meeting within 30 days. So which is specifically given in section 173 of the Companies Act. Next, first auditor. I'm sure our professional friends will be knowing it, and but also will be very much interested to know about it. Section 139 talks about auditor appointment, qualification, and various other provisions regarding appointment of auditor. And first auditor is also discussed in section 139. Every company should appoint the first auditor within 30 days of incorporation. As far as filing ADT1, the form for appointment of auditor, there are two different views. One is appoint the auditor within 30 days in a board meeting and file ADT1 immediately, which is perfect. But law does not mandate that it must be filed. The first auditor appointment by the board of directors must be mandatorily filed through ADT1. But as a professional, it may give you comfort, very good comfort, if it is filed that you have been appointed as auditor. But the law says first auditor is appointed till the first annual general meeting, and in the first annual general meeting he shall be appointed for 5 years. So again, there are divergent views. Some entrepreneurs or some promoters and some professionals also are taking a view that the 5 years timeline is 5 years timeline is optional one. Within a period of 5 years, you can do any number of years, say 2 years, 3 years, or even 1 year. But I would say this is not the correct stand, because the words used is first auditor shall be appointed for a period of 5 years. So appointing in the general meeting, first annual general meeting, for a period of 5 years is the correct stand or correct practice. Yes, in reality, due to various reasons, or I mean, they still even today, and they are appointing auditor every year or 2 years or 3 years. From a promoter point of view, from an entrepreneur point of view, their worry is removal of auditor is a cumbersome procedure. If you have to remove an auditor within a period of 5 years due to various any of the misunderstanding or whatever, then I have to go to the regional director, RD, which is a cumbersome process. So let me appoint for 1 year. If relationship is good, I will continue to appoint for the further year. But again, I say this is not what is given in the law. What is given in the law is auditor shall be appointed for a period of 5 years. So yeah, coming back to ADT1, you have to if after the first AGM, if you are filing ADT1, then you need not even file if the auditor is appointed in the first board meeting. Okay, the first when you file in the AGM, it will ask for SRN. I think being the first form, if you put Z999, it will accept. So of course, some of my professional friends may have a different viewpoint, but here there are two practices being followed. One is appoint the auditor within 30 days, or if the board doesn't appoint, then appoint the convene an extraordinary general meeting, appoint a first auditor, and file ADT1 within. In fact, I hope you may remember, you may know this, but I want to emphasize most of the forms. MCA forms are to be filed within 30 days. There are very few forms, less than 5 forms, which need to be filed within 15 days from the date of event. ADT1 is one such form which needs to be filed within a period of 15 days from the date of event, from the date of either board meeting in case of a first auditor appointment through board meeting, or in a EGM or AGM, 15 days from the date you have to file ADT1. If not, late fee will kick in. So first auditor appointed, he will hold office till the first annual general meeting of the company. Next slide, please. Yeah, verification of registered office. See, during incorporation, if you have a clear utility bill of the owner of the premises, owner has to give an utility bill in his name and a NOC that this company can function in my place. I'm giving my consent for this proposed company to function in my premises, because you cannot enter into a lease agreement though you have got only name availability, company has not formed yet, so you cannot enter into a lease agreement with the owner of the premises. So you will give a utility bill, maybe most of the cases an individual, it can be even director's house also. He has to give an NOC and you will file the registered office. There is a provision during incorporation, you can even give a correspondence address. You can either choose correspondence address or registered office of the company. So which option is being taken at the incorporation stage is important. If you choose a registered office, the address which you are giving as the registered office, then you need not do anything which we are discussing in this slide. Registered office is already informed. For example, you as a professional, you are chartered accountant, you are incorporating a company. So you want to give your address for a temporary purpose for correspondence, and immediately you need to change it by giving, they will enter into a lease agreement immediately after incorporation, they will file a relevant form. Then in that case, INC 22 you need to file within 30 days from the date of incorporation of a company. So again, very important, in case during incorporation, if the professional who incorporated chooses correspondence address and not the registered office address, then you have to file INC 22 within 30 days of incorporation of the company. Next, declaration of commencement of business, extremely important. Friends, a certificate of commencement of business, there were two certificates earlier under 1956 Act, a certificate of incorporation and certificate of commencement of business. 2013 Act has dispensed with the certificate of commencement of business, but it holds the practice that you need to do certain things before commencing a business. Before commencing a business, you must complete certain activities. What are they? First, you need to bring the share capital into the company. You need to bring in the share capital. Whatever subscription money given by the subscribers, that need to be brought in, and then you have to file this form INC 20A, which is extremely important. So bring the money, file form INC 20A, and then only you can commence the business. What is commencing of business? You cannot even spend the money from the account of the company. It is also operations of the company. You cannot give any check from the account of the company, and you cannot even do wire transfer, fund transfer, whatever it is from the bank account of the company. Before you issue any check, before you do any NEFT transfer to any third party, you need to file form INC 20A. You need to mandatorily file form INC 20A. So see, there are various cases. We have seen various cases where incorporation is done by somebody else, and they forget to, they are going and filing some form like allotment or some other thing, whereas system is not allowing them to file. It says you have not filed your INC 20A within 180 days. So file INC 20A, and if 180 days have crossed, go and get it compounded before ROC, and then file INC 20A. Then only you can file your form for increase of capital or form for allotment. So that is why it is extremely important that capital must be brought in and INC 20A form must be filed. Mandatory attachment in INC 20A is the bank account statement of the company's bank account, stating that the subscribers have brought in the money. That is the evidence. You have to attach that. Again, you have to be very careful in this attachment bank account. There should not be any debits. There can only be credit of money coming in from the first subscribers, and there should not be any debit, because you are yet to file INC 20A. Only after you file INC 20A, and if it is approved, then only you can commence business and you can issue wire transfer or checks. So when there are only two forms which are allowed before you file INC 20A. One is ADT 1 for auditor appointment, and another one is INC 22. I think we discussed verification of registered office and appointment of auditor. These are the things which you can file even before you file INC 20A, because both these happen maybe in the first 30 days itself. So thereafter you bring the money. For bringing the money, you have time till at least 60 days, and only these two forms are allowed. There are various hundreds or thousands of cases every year where they fail to file even INC 20A within 180 days. So, and without knowing the law, they even they bring the money, they start invoicing, they start issuing checks, but they have not filed INC 20A, which is really a big non-compliance. As a professional, we need to take care of this, that they bring the shareholders money first, file the INC 20A, and then only they must start using the money from the bank account of the company. Next, please. Next slide, please. Yeah. So once the money is brought in, you need to issue share certificate. In fact, law says you have to issue share certificate within 2 months from the incorporation of the company. So this is what I said. Ideally, in the first board meeting, it is better to bring in the money, issue the share certificate also. There are cases, where, see, this is one again very peculiar scenario. The subscribers, the first subscribers, you need to issue them share certificate within 2 months, even in case they have not brought in money or something. So there are some cases where we have faced as professional, even after 3 or 4 months, they have not brought in the money, and there are no chances of bringing the money also due to various reasons. Excuse me. So, but in those cases, we have taken different stand. We have advised them in different ways. One way is bringing another shareholder, maybe a promoter director. He will pay the money to the shareholder who is not able to pay, and that shareholder will pay the money to the company. It won't be perfect compliance, but anyhow, we cannot comply both letter and spirit, but at least in spirit, here we will be able to comply with it, because at least money, prescribed share money goes into the bank account of the company from the very same subscriber. But prior to that, a share transfer could be entered between another third party, and the third party gives money to him, and then he gives the money. So these kind of things also happen in some practical cases. What I'm trying to say here is, all other cases, future cases, only a person brings the money, he becomes a shareholder. Whereas as far as first subscribers are concerned, they become shareholders by virtue of signing the memorandum and articles. From day one, they become the shareholders. So, so it is, as auditors, as professionals, please advise them to bring money as soon as possible and hold the first board meeting. Note the fact that money has been brought in, issue share certificate, appoint the auditor. So all these things have to happen immediately within the first month, ideally. If not, at least in the second month, bring the money, issue the share certificate. And if the auditor is not appointed in the first board meeting within 30 days, hold an EGM and appoint the first auditor. Yeah, next please. First annual general meeting. First annual general meeting needs to be held within 9 months from the end of financial year. Only for the first annual general meeting, this is being given. We all know that in remaining cases, it is 6 months from the end of financial year. For the last 2 years only, we are getting some relief. Last year, we got 3 months relief. That is up to 31st December, we were able to hold the AGM. This year, it is given up to 30th November. So yesterday only we got that relief. So, okay, one more thing is, if the company is incorporated on or after January, then you need not, you have an option to close in the immediate March or the next March. Whereas if it is incorporated anytime before 1st of January, anytime before 1st of January of a particular year, then you need to mandatorily close by 31st March. So I repeat, for example, a company is incorporated on 1st December 2020. So as per the provision, if a company is incorporated before 31st of March of particular financial year, then the company which is incorporated in 1st December 2020, mandatorily they have to close the financial year on 31/3/21. A company is incorporated on 5th January 21. 5th January 21, a company is incorporated. Here, they have the option to close it either on 31/3/21 or 31/3/22. They have this option. Next, please. So this is what we have looked at so far. One is SPICE Part A is being used for the name approval, and the same SPICE form we use Part B and incorporate the company. Of course, we attach all other forms, affidavits. Then first auditor appointment, ADT1 we need to file, and in case registered office is not selected at the time of incorporation, only correspondence address is taken at the time of incorporation, then we file form INC 22. So INC 22 is only an optional form. For that matter, even ADT1 is an optional form for the first auditor only. There is first auditor appointed by the board. But INC 20A is a mandatory form, an extremely important form. before company makes any expenses or any operation, this form needs to be filed. And as an auditor, because you are auditing the financials of the company, when you see the bank statements, please see when they have filed the INC 20A, which is extremely important. Next. So we are going into the annual compliances, because most of the companies we deal with, these private limited companies, of course, there is a old practice that they will come once in a year. Annually, they will come, audit will be done, financials will be prepared, and AOC4 and MGT7 will be filed. So this was the practice under 1956 Act, but same cannot be said in the 2013 Act. As I was mentioning, this INC 20A is one classic example, and there are other forms like DPT3 is there, MSME is there, and there are forms, other forms also, which need to be periodically filed. So now let us look at the annual compliances which need to be done. Next. Next slide, please. Yeah, I mean, as far as annual declaration is concerned, first thing is every director in the first board meeting in every financial year, he has to disclose his interest in other entities in which he is holding directorship in MBP1, and declaration of non-disqualification of directors in form number DIR 8. MBP1 is given in section 184, and declaration of non-disqualification, it is given in section 164. What is the significance here? A company may enter into contracts, company may enter into transactions with other companies in which directors are interested. So there are various sections like 185, 186, 188. These may be attracted. When these are attracted, you may have to pass a board resolution, or you may have to have a shareholders resolution. So for all these reasons, when we are entering into a contract where directors are interested in that company, or directors are holding shares more than 5% in that company, you have to be extremely cautious and do certain compliances. That is why in the beginning of the financial year, ideally on 1st of April, the directors need to give, because on 2nd of April or 5th of April also, company may get into a transaction with the company in which director is interested. So every year this MBP1 needs to be obtained. Similarly, non-disqualification, that he is not disqualified in any of the company where he is holding directorship, that he needs to give, because imagine a scenario where your company has only 2 directors and one director is a director in another company, and it has not filed financial for 3 years. So that company is struck off, because of which this director is disqualified to be a director. Now there are only 2 directors in the company, whereas one is disqualified, and you have only 1 director. There is no proper board here. So that is why to get to know that a director is not disqualified, you need to get a form DIR 8 for non-disqualification every year. And in case a director is appointed in the middle of the year, you need to immediately get MBP1 and DIR 8 in the first board meeting in which a new director is appointed. You need to get this. And this disclosure is required to be done every year in the first board meeting. You collect it and place it in the first board meeting of the company, first board meeting of the financial year of the company. Next. So this is what both this form MBP1 and DIR 8 talks about. So MBP1 talks about interest in other entities. He has to give what are the companies, firms, or body corporate in which he is holding directorship or shareholding. He has to give at the first board meeting in the financial year, and I mean first board meeting when he is appointed as an additional director. In the first board meeting he has to give, and going forward every financial year, at the first board meeting of every financial year he has to give Similarly, when there is a change also, he has to give. When he is appointed as a director in between the financial year, he needs to intimate. When he acquires more than 5% shares in any company, he has to intimate immediately. So as far as Form DR8, I think I've already spoken about that, and also the importance of it, that he is not disqualified as a director in other companies as well. Next, please. And DR8, he needs to give for last 3 financial year. Last 3 financial year, he is not disqualified, needs to be given in DR8. Filing of financial statement, yeah, we all know, all the professionals are doing it. Preparation of financials and filing it. We need to file director's report, auditor's report, notice also. See, what the caution, what I would like to give here is, this is what I was telling you, that this is becoming an expertise. See, practically in reality, what is happening is companies go to the auditor, they prepare the financials. AOC4 can be form can be signed either by a company secretary or by a chartered accountant. So they prepare the form. So when they prepare the form, they prepare the attachments also. What are the attachment? Notice, director's report. Now CSR report also has come. So they prepare all these and attach. They file the AOC4. And for MGT7 certification, since practicing company secretary only can sign, then they come to the practicing company secretary. But as I was telling you, I'm very sad to say this practical reality. Still, a lot of professionals who file the financials alone with ROC, they are still stuck up with the practice of 1956. A very fundamental. I can give lots and lots of examples, but I will give a very simplistic example. In the 1956 Act, it is enough if you hold 1 board meeting in every quarter. So 4 board meeting in a year you can hold, and it is a complete compliance. Whereas under 2013 Act, gap between 2 board meetings cannot exceed 120 days. It cannot exceed 120 days. It is a big non-compliance. So when our professionals prepare and file the AOC4, in the director's report, they put the dates of the meetings. In fact, it is not even mandated to put the dates of the meeting in the director's report. It only says board met so many times, and they put the dates also, and some gap goes beyond 120 days in many cases we have seen. And there are other cases as well. Some of the information, dates, these are given incorrectly, and when it comes later, when we have to give MGT8 or MGT7, we are in a fix that lot of non-compliance is already reported in the inadvertently wrong non-compliance has happened in AOC4 and its attachments. So that is why I am saying the directors trust the professionals, and whereas because of lack of knowledge by the concerned person doing this notice director's report, lot of errors are happening. And now earlier these STP forms, they go into the system, they open only in very rare cases where there are issues, when there are complaints. But now there is a separate cell in Manesar, Delhi, where they take, open and see forms on a regular basis, and when there are errors, then they immediately report to the concerned professional body. CA Institute, if the person who is certified is a chartered accountant, and Company Secretary Institute, if the person certified is a company secretary. Even couple of days back, one professional called me and said, this is what information was given, and I have certified. Today I have received a notice from MC, and I have received notice from my institute. How to face this, how to deal with it. So this gives quite a bit of trauma, mental trauma for the professionals. So that is why when we are certifying, whereas work is done by a novice who doesn't know much about the work. It is extremely difficult, and we are risking our own career, and we are risking the peace of directors also. So my request is, it is extremely important. A person having expertise should prepare the annual financial statement. I'm not only saying it's a company secretary, it can be any professional. He must know the provisions of the act thoroughly, because he is disclosing the activities happen throughout the year. He must know the whole background and then do it. It cannot be done in a monotonous way. So AOC4 needs to be filed within 30 days from the date of AGM. As far as 21 is concerned, we have time till 30th November to hold the annual general meeting. And for example, if you are having 30th November as the annual general meeting, you can file within 30th December without additional fees. So this is as far as AOC 4 is concerned. Next. Yeah, this is about XBRL. Next. Yeah, XBRL. Listed companies, applicability of XBRL. Listed companies and companies having paid up capital of more than 5 crores or turnover of more than 100 crores, they need to give their and companies which are required to prepare their financial statement in accordance with Indian Accounting Standard Rules 2015. The above mentioned companies needs to give their financials in XBRL form. Certain exceptions are given, for non-NBFCs are given exemption. Housing finance companies need not file in XBRL. Companies engaged in the business of banking and insurance sector, they need not do. Banking company, insurance company, they need not do in XBRL. One of the important thing is, once you start filing under XBRL, there is no going back. You, for example, a company's turnover is more than 100 crores. It started filing in XBRL. Turnover in the subsequent years comes less than 100 crores. No, still you have to file only in XBRL. Once an XBRL, always an XBRL. Next. Next, please. Yeah, CSR report, if we all know, CSR is applicable when more net worth is more than 500 crores, turnover is more than 1000 crores, net profit is more than 5 crores. Important thing as far as CSR report is, this report is amended from 22nd of January 21. So for the current financial year, you need to give a CSR report, which is a very detailed one. MGT9 is almost dispensed with. You need not attach MGT9, but MGT9 gone. CSR report with lot of disclosures we need to handle this year. As we all know, very important change has happened as far as CSR is concerned. Any unspent amount in CSR, first, let me read the last point first. If the amount is related to an ongoing project, then it can be transferred to a unspent CSR account. Companies needs to open a separate CSR account, unspent CSR account. They need to transfer it there, and from there you can use it for next 2 years. However, you do not have an ongoing project, or you have not transferred that money within 30th of April 21, then in that case, within 6 months, that is, we have another only 5 or 6 days, within 30th September, this amount needs to be transferred to a fund specified in Schedule 7 within a period of 6 months from the end of financial year. I will repeat this point alone once again on CSR. CSR, when unspent amount is there, as on 31st March, if they have unspent amount, then if there are ongoing project, then they have to open a bank account in April, before 30th of April 21, unspent CSR account. They have to transfer the unspent amount to this account, and for the next 2 years, they can use that fund for the ongoing project. Okay, there is another scenario where there is no ongoing project. Scenario 2, there is ongoing project, but company fails to transfer the money to the open a separate bank account or to transfer to the ongoing project. Then In both these cases, company needs to transfer the unspent CSR amount to the specified fund mentioned in Schedule 7. Most popular fund in Schedule 7 is Prime Minister's Relief Fund. They can transfer it and through NEFT or whatever and get a receipt, and that will be a sufficient compliance. Next. So we are dealing with notice, director's report, AOC for a little bit, and CSR report. Now 92, section 92 deals with annual return of the company. We all know annual return must be filed within 60 days from the end of financial year. From the end of annual general meeting of the company. So this year, in case you are holding the AGM in the last week of November, say 30th of November, then you will have time till 30th of January or probably 29th of January. Since December has 31 days, January 29th, before January 29th, you need to file the annual return. In case of one-person company, this is another very new development. OPC, small company, annual return required to be filed not in MGT 7 but in MGT 7A. In case the company has not filed the MGT 7 or annual return for the previous year, if you are filing today, again you have to file in MGT 7A only. So from the time MGT 7A has come into picture, even for the previous year, you cannot file in MGT 7. You have to use MGT 7A only. Next. MGT 8 compliance certificate. Applicability: listed companies, companies having paid up capital of more than 10 crores or turnover of more than 50 crores. See, these are companies, the criteria given here, if you see, the first two are companies which are mandatorily required to appoint a company secretary also. One is listed companies. SEBI ODR itself says any listed company, irrespective of your paid up capital or turnover, even if your paid up capital is 1 crore, you need to have a whole-time company secretary. Similarly, if your paid up capital is more than 10 crores, you need to have a company secretary. So these kind of companies, of course, turnover more than 50 crores. If any of the criteria is attracted, then you have to file Form NGT 8, which is basically a compliance certificate that various provisions of the Companies Act is complied with, and only a practicing company secretary can issue this MGT 8. He has to state that he has see the registers, records, books and papers of the company, and whatever given under Companies Act and laws applicable to the company is complied with. It is a mini secretarial audit only. Very abridged form of secretarial audit report is MGT 8. Next. Board meeting. Every company should have at least 4 board meetings, and as I already mentioned, gap should not exceed 120 days. Gap should not exceed 120 days. In case of a OPC, small company, dormant company, a startup company, it is enough. They have 2 board meetings in a year. Once in 6 months, if they have 2 board meetings, it is sufficient. However, if they are holding only 2 board meetings in a year, the gap between those 2 board meetings should be not less than 90 days. They cannot conduct 2 board meetings one day after the other and say that we have completed 2 board meetings for this financial year. Next, annual general meeting. Yeah, within 6 months, company needs to 6 months from the end of financial year, companies need to hold the annual general meeting. As far as 21, now they have given time till 30th of November to hold the AGM, and in case of top list 100 listed entities, AGM needs to be conducted within 5 months from the end of financial year. Within 5 months, that is by 31st of August, AGM should have been conducted. Maximum gap between 2 annual general meeting should not exceed 15 months. See, as far as annual general meeting is concerned, we need to comply with 3 points. One is, in every calendar year there must be an annual general meeting. gap between two annual general meetings should not exceed 15 months. Now, whereas now an extension is given in the notification itself, it is mentioned that it cannot exceed 17 months. Instead of 15, you can go up to 17 months. And third is within 6 months from the end of financial year, you need to hold a AGM. So as far as AGM, every calendar year there must be AGM. 15 gap between two board AGM should not exceed 15 months, and within 6 months from the end of financial year, you must hold a AGM. So all these three, it is not optional. It is, you cannot say that I have complied with one and I just missed another one. You cannot say. You have to comply with all these 3 points as far as annual general meeting date is concerned. Yeah. Next. We will also quickly look at other annual forms. Annually, what are the forms being filed? DR3 KYC. Everyone who has obtained DIN during the previous financial year, and every DIN holder, he has to file DR3 KYC. If it is the first one, if it is the first time they are filing, they have to file a physical DR3 form, DR3 KYC form. If it is not for the first year, then web KYC form needs to be filed, and every year this needs to be done 30th of September. And if they do not file this KYC within 30th of September or such extended time by MCA, then the DIN will be deactivated, and for activating the DIN, the director needs to pay 5,000 rupees. So DR3 KYC form is a free form, no fees is payable, but it's need to be filed within the due date. If we fail to file within the due date, then DIN will be deactivated and 5,000 rupee amount needs to be filed. Next one is web form, KYC web form. Please go to the previous slide. Web form, as I already mentioned, if it is not the first time you are filing, once you already filed a physical DR3 KYC form, from the second year, web form, web MCA site itself, there is a provision for web. Under MCA site, we have to file this one directly, and OTP will go to the director's phone number and email ID. And of course, there are quite a lot of difficulty in the OTP going to the particularly foreign director's mail ID or phone number. There is no other go. We need to try until it gets succeed. So our professional friends are having a fantastic time with IT portal, income tax portal. Similarly, MCA portal also. We have very fun time. But I think like 2 lines go, our line has become a very small line compared to the difficulties, struggles encountered in income tax portal. So now we think MCA is extremely good. Very happy about MCA. After we see the struggle our professionals are facing in income tax portal. Okay, coming to the DPT3 annual filing of return of deposit and receipt of money which is not considered as deposit. So companies accepting deposits, they file this annual return of deposits earlier also, but few years back this DPT3 is introduced. And now for example, to give very simple example, a company is obtaining loan from a bank. It files charge immediately, but still it will be covered under DPT3 also. It is not considered as deposit, so you have to file DPT3. Company obtains a loan from a director for working capital purposes, you have to disclose in DPT3. So it is based on the transaction, but here the most practical difficulty is 31st March year closes. You have time to do your audit till September. In these cases, extreme cases in up to October, November also. But DPT3 has to be filed by 30th of June every year. So it is really a practical difficulty, because if you ask, can you file DPT3 without the financials being audited or financial being signed finally? Yes, that is how practically it is happening. But there cannot be further changes in the financials numbers which is disclosed in the DPT3. So probably my thing is MCA has to take a real view here. Probably on once for all, they must give a broader time limit for DPT3, maybe along with the annual return, I mean, where financials are filed, something like that. So 30th of June gives a lot of practical difficulty both for the company and for the professionals, because audit is not completed for private company, but still loans obtained, loans from directors, or many other details. I mean, they have given around 10 items. I am telling 2 items which are commonly applicable: loan from banks, loan from promoters for working capital requirements. These are very common examples which will cover under DPT3. Next, these are 2 half-yearly returns. MSME form, where there is loans or dues to MSMEs, then you have to file half-yearly return. For the due from April to September, you have to file within 31st of October, and for October to March, you have to file within 30th of April. If the due is for more than 45 days, then it needs to be mentioned in this MSME form. If you have made a payment after 45 days, but as on this particular date, for example, as on 30th September, it is not due, but you have paid after 45 days, means our view is yes, even that needs to be mentioned in the form. But you can say that it was paid on such and such date and it is still not outstanding, because this form we have to give all the payments outstanding for more than 45 days and paid after 45 days also you need to mention here. Then PAS 6, see, PAS 6 is not applicable to listed companies. PAS 6 is not applicable to private limited companies also. PAS 6 is applicable only to unlisted public companies. So because they have to give a reconciliation of share capital audit report, this unlisted public companies needs to give. And because now DMAT, unlisted public companies also, DMAT is made mandatory. So how many shares have been, I mean, DMAT is mandatory in the sense any new allotment, any share transfer, it can be done only through a DMAT account. So I repeat, unlisted public companies, any new allotment or any share transfer, it can be done only through DMAT. If you are not transferring, if the shares are allotted previously, if you want to hold in a physical form, you are allowed. Only thing is you have to inform here. But certain categories of people like promoters, they need to mandatorily convert their shareholding into DMAT. But other than that, if others are holding in physical form, you can hold. But if you are going to transfer to anybody, at that point of time, you need to DMAT, and only then you can transfer if you are a unlisted public company. So as far as this PAS 6 is concerned, within 60 days from the end of each half of financial year, I mean each half of the year, I mean financial year, that is 31st March as well as 30th September, you have to file this PAS 6. What are the, how many shares are in DMAT, how many in physical, and share transfers happen, and certain other details. So within 60 days from the end of each half year, PAS 6 needs to be filed. Next. So now we are moving into certain event-based compliances. One time or a certain thing may be intermittent also. As I was mentioning you, these are forms like DAR 12 and certain other similar forms. Let us get into the next slide, please. Next. So these are the forms which we are going to very quickly see in the next 15 to 25 minutes. DR12 for appointment of directors, INC 22 change in registered office, change in name of the company, charge form, satisfaction of charges, appointment of auditor, we file in CRA 2, pass 3, return of allotment, MR1 appointment of managing director, increase in authorized capital. These are all event based compliances, but I think I'm not covering all these 7 or 8. I'm covering only DR12, INC 22 and PAS 3. I think only these are being covered in the remaining slides. Let us discuss about other things here itself. Change of name of the company. Of course, first you have to get the name availability from the ROC, then hold a shareholders meeting, then file INC 24, which needs to be approved. Then charge registration modification, again a very big topic, because within 30 days you have to file the charge. Then immediately additional fees gets really bigger and bigger. Then it also goes into a percentage of loan obtained after a particular period of days, and after I think 180 days or so you cannot file CHG1 at all. So the person who gave the loan, he really stand in a very unsafe situation if CHG1 is not filed within the stipulated time. There have been various discussion. Why are you putting a lender in a trouble? Why can't he file after 6 months? There is no provision even to compound. Yeah, you cannot go before RD, you cannot go to central government Delhi, you cannot go to anybody beyond this period given under the Act. So but the view of Ministry of Corporate Affairs is, see, a lender gives a loan to a particular company. Excuse me. Lender gives loan to a particular company, and you, in case you are filing another charge form with a prior date, and that is also registered, you stand in a better chance. Whereas that person has gone ahead with a bona fide belief that at the date of giving loan to that particular company, there was no existing loan in the MCA site. But you come at a later point of time, file a document which is predated, file your form CHG1 and get a prior charge. So here the interest of the lender who act everything within their timeline, their interest is affected. That is why we are still giving around 180 days. You pay an additional fees which is almost like a penalty. You pay that and then register. But beyond the period, it is like limitation. For example, somebody has lent some money. He has to file a case, means he has to file within a period of 3 years. Beyond 3 years, he cannot even file a case for collection of even genuine money given. Similarly, CHG1 also, the limitation is 6 months. Beyond that, you cannot even file it. Satisfaction of charges. Again, here you need to file the satisfaction immediately. Of course, at least satisfaction, we find a practical way. We approach the bank to give a letter. As on today, there is no loan outstanding, and we file that. So at least here there is a way, because it is only a no due letter given by the bank. And in case of delay also, there is a workaround. You can work around and still file. Whereas CHG1, there will be loan agreement, various documents, signing would have happened, loan disbursement would have happened in a particular period of time, and it's extremely important to file within the due date. As CHG4 also extremely important to file within the due date, because you've already paid the money, and why should you still have a liability, a charge being attached to your property, charge being attached to the company. So it is important to file CHG4 also in time. Appointment of cost auditor, CRA 2. PAS 3 we will shortly discuss little detail. MR1 for appointment of managing director, increase in authorized capital, SH7. So these are based on when you appoint a managing director, you need to file MR1, and if you are increasing authorized capital, you need to file SH7. So there are associated compliances as well for these events. Now, as I already mentioned, let us see three basic compliances which happen quite frequently. That is, one is appointment of director, second one is shifting of registered office, third one is allotment. So these are three events which could happen in a small company, private limited company, maybe little frequently. So we will see these three alone. Next, appointment of director, cessation of director, and KMP also. The change in designation, in all these cases, we need to file the relevant form, that is form DAR12. You need to file that. We need to get the consent from the director and KMP, which needs to be appointed. And I find that a lot of professionals do not file MBP1 and DIR8, but we always attach it, and we think it is one of the important attachment, and extracts of the resolution, board meeting or shareholders resolution, that needs to be appointed, attached as well. See, one peculiar thing which happened in our which we noticed and rectified in the last minute. Last minute is, see, in one case, directors were in abroad, and we prepared and sent everything, all the documents. We put the board meeting date and consent to act as a director also on the very same date. Extracts, everything has been put, went, signed, and came back. 12th August, board meeting has happened for appointment of the director. So we have sent the extracts as 12th August. Consent also on 12th August. But what happened is, the director is a foreign director. He has signed it on 16th of August, and he put 16th of August as the date of signing the consent. So you have to get the consent before you appoint him as a director, and you are attaching two extract. Consent is dated 16th, appointment is dated 12th. How can it happen? This is a very clear case of a non-compliance, but we found, fortunately, at the last minute we found and rectified it. Because see, we have put only that same date and we have sent, but the person signing, he has changed it to a current date and sent it, which should have been checked by the professional also. So DR12, extremely important. Cessation is also extremely critical. One certain key points in cessation, resignation is, a person who is resigning, he cannot sign that form. It is not only, I'm not only saying ethically, practically also, MCA site will not allow resigning director. If he is signing, it will not accept, which is important. And one director, sometimes somebody will file, two directors will be there, because of dispute or something, somebody will file their resignation by DIR 11 independently, then only one director will be there. In which case, the remaining one director, he can call for a shareholders meeting, appoint another director, file DIR 12, and bring in one director immediately. So these kind of instances also we have faced and advised several times. Change in designation, whenever additional director becomes a director, you need to file DIR 12. Again, a lot of professionals fail to do this, because unless you file, even after 3 or 4 years, still I am seeing their name is showing as additional director, which clearly shows the person, the professional who has done annual filing over the period of time, he does not know that once he becomes an additional director, one more DR12 needs to be filed, because of which till date he is shown as an additional director. So similarly, a normal director becomes a whole-time director, again you need to file DR12. So these are some of the important points as far as DR12 is concerned. Next, pass 3, return of allotment. Return of allotment can happen for various reasons. It can happen for allotment by rights issue, allotment by private placement, allotment by preferential allotment, issue of debentures. For all these bonus issue, ESOP, consideration other than cash, conversion of loan into equity. In all these cases, in all these modes, whenever you issue equity or convert loan into equity, then or issue debentures. So for all these, a single form pass 3 need to be filed. Of course, valuation report needs to be attached. The valuation report will be required in most of the cases, except rights issue. Except rights issue, in most of the cases, valuation report by a registered valuer needs to be attached. So this is what is pass 3. Private placement is quite a big process. You need to prepare huge list of documents, voluminous document. Return of allotment itself is huge. It contains a lot of information. So private placement, preferential allotment, kindly do not take easily. Even rights issue, you need to comply and get all the documents, renunciation, everything from the directors and shareholders also. Yeah, shareholders. From the shareholders, you must get the renunciation properly and then file the pass 3 form. Next, INC 22, intimation of registered office. Yes, initially we file, if we select communication address during incorporation, then change in registered office also you need to file very frequently within local limits. Private limited companies will change their office very frequently. Here what is important is what is accepted utility bills. Utility bill has to be telephone bill, gas bill, electricity bill and mobile bill, and it must be not older than 2 months. See, there is a vast difference between giving this utility bill at the time of incorporation and at the time of post incorporation. At the time of incorporation, it can be in the name of an individual owner who can give an NOC that they can have the company in their premises. Whereas post incorporation, you need to give a lease agreement in the name of the company, or rental agreement in the name of the company, and utility bill. Utility bill at times can be in the owner's name also, and in the sense, for example, EB bill or something you can give. Ideally, telephone bill or mobile bill, landline number or net, ACT or Airtel or their bill also you can show and attach. Next, so there are ROCs, certain ROCs. Tamil Nadu and Maharashtra alone has single state various ROCs. Tamil Nadu has Coimbatore and Chennai. Coimbatore covers the area for Krishnagiri, Salem, Namakkal, Nilgiris and so on, whereas Coimbatore, Dharmaburi and so on, all other remaining districts come under Chennai. As far as Maharashtra is concerned, similarly, Ahmednagar, Kolhapur, Pune, Ratnagiri, Sangli, Satara, Sholapur, these districts, come under Pune, and rest come under the Mumbai jurisdiction. Next. There are certain states where there is a single ROC covering more than one states. Assam ROC covers Assam, Meghalaya, Manipur, Tripura, Mizoram, Nagaland, Arunachal Pradesh. Whereas Delhi and Haryana comes under Delhi only. Similarly, Goa, Daman and Dayu. At times, even our Tamil Nadu ROC acts as a acting ROC for Goa, Daman and Dayu also. So, yeah, next. I think this is my last slide as far as discussion is concerned. So one is within the local limits. If the shifting of registered office is within the local limits, you can file INC 22. Utility bill extracts you can attach, and you can change the registered office of the company within the local limits. If it is outside the local limits within the same state, for example, from Chennai or going to Tanjavur means, then in that case, you have to pass a shareholders resolution also, and then file MGT 14 for that purpose. Apart from INC 22, you have to attach MGT 14 also. If it is from ROC to ROC, for example, from Chennai to Coimbatore, you are shifting means INC 22, of course, it will come in all the instances. Then MGT 14, since you are filing a special resolution, you have to file MGT 14. Then INC 23. INC 23 is the form for approval given by regional director. You have to apply to the regional director to approve your shifting. In these two cases, when it is from ROC to ROC or from state to state, RD approval is required, and hence you have to file INC 23. and INC 28 is once this order is given approving the shifting, you have to file that order with the registrar in form INC 28. So same thing holds good for state to state also. Same forms, INC 22, of course, MGT 14 since special resolution is being passed, INC 23 for approval from the regional director, and INC 28 is the last form to be filed during shifting. Once RD approves and gives the shifting, then you have to file the same with ROC. Next. Next slide, please. So this is what we have looked at. Compliances we have looked at. To start with, we looked at the post incorporation compliances. INC 28, please do not forget, most important form. And then mandatory annual compliances. Of course, AOC 4, MGT 7 or 7A, all the professionals will take care. But also please take care of forms like MSME, DPT 3, and forms like KYC, because KYC is something in a free of cost we can do for the directors. If we leave, then we have to pay 5,000. The DIN also will be deactivated. So then yeah, 6-month form we already discussed, like MSME form, DPT 3. So apart from annual compliances, we need to take care of this half-yearly and other compliances also. Event based, which we discussed finally, like DAR 12 or PAS 3 allotment, or INC 22 shifting within the local limits, outside the local limits, or from one state to other. So thank you very much for very patiently listening. Tech team, you can go to the last slide. It will have my email ID and mobile number. Thank you very much for your patient listening. You can ask your questions for the next probably 10 to 15 minutes. I may have to close a little early since I have a meeting around 6:45. So I'll be able to answer your questions till 6:40 or so. After that, you can raise you can send your questions to my mail ID, or you can call me. I will be more than happy to help a fellow professional. Thank you very much. Over to you,
Thank
sir.
thank you very much, Mr. Kumar. There are about 15 questions. Can we go one by one, sir?
Yeah,
Please, question number one. How to check SRN of filed DPT3 without logging the MCA account?
no, any SRN number, you should have a login credentials, sir. Only then you can see the SRN number. You need to have a login credential, and only then you can check the SRN number. And certain SRN numbers will not be visible in VPD also. For example, MGT14 will not be visible in VPD. I mean, without even downloading, you cannot see what are the forms being filed. MGT14 will not be shown. So you have to log in basically. There is no provision to do without login.
Is it mandatory to file ADT1 within 30 days of incorporation?
No, can you repeat it again?
Is it mandatory to file ADT1 within 30 days of incorporation?
No, sir. No, I already mentioned. It is not mandatory to file. There are two ways in which you can do. See, first auditor appointment within 30 days, board has to appoint. Otherwise, within 90 days, shareholders have to appoint, and then ADT1 can be filed. So, for example, within 30 days, board appoints. Then within next 15 days, you can file the ADT1 form. Or within 60 or 70 days, shareholders appoint. Then next within 15 days, you can file, and this is also optional. In case if you fails to file for the first auditor, when the first auditor is confirmed in the first annual general meeting, you can file your first ADT1 after the first AGM also.
Okay. If the first auditor is appointed in the first AGM, whether first AGM will adopt unaudited accounts?
No, sir. See, first auditor need to be appointed in the board meeting or in the shareholders meeting. There is no change in that. You need to appoint the auditor, first auditor within 30 days of board meeting, or within, I'm not sure about the number of days, I think either 60 or 90 days in the general meeting. So it is not that they are not appointed. Only thing is filing of that form is probably MCA thinks that anyhow after first AGM, anyhow you need to file one ADT1. So why do you file two ADT1 within a short period of time? That is why they have given. It is not that they are signing unaudited financials, because they are already appointed by the board or by a shareholders already.
Okay. First auditor appointment in first AGM 5 years from the end of first AGM to the end of 6th AGM. Is this understanding right?
Yes, this understanding is right. Yes, correct.
Okay. Is there any time limit to bring the share capital for memorandum subscription? That is subscribers to the memorandum.
Interesting question, sir. Interesting question. Ideally 60 days. Ideally 60 days, because you have to issue share certificate within 60 days. Ideally 60 days and issue also within 60 days. But if you don't bring within 60 days, nothing has been mentioned very clearly under the act. What is the remedy? This has not been given clearly. I also told we faced certain difficulties. So what we have to infer here is, you have to issue a certificate within 60 days from the date of incorporation. So bring the money before that and issue the certificate within 60 days. That is the ideal scenario. Yeah.
So Form 20 also cannot be filed, sir.
Yeah, 20A cannot be filed unless you bring the money. Correct? Yeah.
Yes, sir. How shares are issued to the shareholders of a private limited company? How folio numbers are allotted? How shares are issued in further increase of capital, and how folio numbers are determined for further issue or right issue?
Okay. Sir, folio number is like your bank account number. Once you have one bank account number, say money can be put in the very same bank account number. Similarly, once you have a folio number, later when you have a rights issue, when you have a private placement, under the same folio number, shares can be allotted. Okay, I will give an example. A company has two directors, company has two shareholders, same directors, same shareholders. Folio number is folio number 1 for the first shareholder, folio number 2 for the second shareholder. Certificate number 1 for the first shareholder, certificate number 2 for the second shareholder. Okay, now another 10 lakh is brought by them. 5 lakh each. 5 lakh each is brought by them. Now what should we do? 5 lakh is given by the first shareholder. His folio number is 1 and the shares will be allotted under folio number 1. Second shareholder brings 5 lakh. For him, shares will be allotted under folio number 2 and 5 lakh will go under the folio number 2. As regards the share certificate, now you have to issue new share certificate. So number 3, share certificate number 3 will be given to the first shareholder since he brought 5 lakhs. Share certificate number 4 will be given to the second shareholder since he brought another 5 lakhs. Hope this answers your question.
Yeah, and also the share folio, even if the shareholder ceased to be a shareholder, folio number cannot be allotted to anyone.
You cannot give it to another shareholder, correct? Yeah.
Yeah. So 7, sir, do we need to issue share certificate as per the format prescribed by the Companies Act?
Yes, sir. Yes, you have to give as per the format. I also showed that format. Yes, you have to print as per that format only. Yes. There are 2 ways in which we print the share certificate. Empty share certificates are available in places like Sitharaman & Co. We can bring it, even write handwritten also you can write, but some people will think it is not very professional. There are some printers who will print in the pre-printed share certificate. Company number will not be there, the shareholder number, the number of shares, these details will not be there. Remaining thing will be there from Sitharaman & Co. and you can print. And there are other people, easier thing is there are other people, some printers, they will have this format given under the Companies Act. Only you have to key in the details and they will print and give the share certificates. Yes, sir. Next.
Next, in case of filing ADT1 on resignation of previous auditor, Form ADT1 requires for SRN of ADT3 filed by earlier auditor. However, previous auditor has sent the resignation letter to the company and given NOC to the new auditor, but not filed ADT3. What is the solution?
Yes, sir. It's a very difficult one, but we have to file it. Only thing is we have to prepare ADT3 form, everything, prepare it, attach, because he has already given resignation. Prepare, attach the resignation letter or whatever, and send it to him. Go and sit in his office. Send the director. Send some senior officer. He has to file it. No other go, sir.
Okay, thanks, sir. Please explain the role of auditors and guidance required while forming a company as an advisor. It's a very generic question. Hello.
Yeah, I'm hearing, sir.
Yes, sir. Maybe that's a big question. I mean,
yeah,
do you want to do some?
Yeah, CSR report is mandatory for all companies or companies for which CSR provisions are applicable. In my view, only when CSR provisions are applicable, it is mandatory, in my view. Yeah.
Yes, sir. Please clarify the point with regard to disclosure of date of board meetings in director's report.
Yeah, see, director's report, you have to say how many times the board met. You need not give the dates of board meeting. You can say board met 4 times, board met 5 times. Because the dates need to be accurate, because in the forms what dates have been given, some of the forms they would have filed for DR told a particular date may be there. If you are not aware of it and if you give a different date, they get into a problem. And then gap between 2 board meetings, if it is more than 120 days, you get into a problem. So here board met so many number of times, and that also needs to be correct. We cannot simply put 4. There could be occasion they would have met 5 or 6 times also. Give the accurate number of times board met during the financial year in director's report.
Okay. Sir, the bank account where unspent money kept can be used for
One
business
more
transactions.
question is there, sir. Sorry, one more question is there in 13. Yeah, board meeting should be 4 in a year. Is it for the financial year or calendar year? It is for financial year, sir. Yeah. Yeah, next.
Yeah, financial year. Yeah. 14. Sir, the bank accounts where unspent money kept can be used for business transactions. If business transaction happen, will it attract any penal provisions?
Yes,
I think
sir. It can. Yeah. Yes. It unspent amount can be used only for CSR projects. Only for CSR projects, not for business transaction. Yes, penalty is given. I think around 2 lakhs.
Yes.
Around 2 lakh will be the penalty for all the KMP. I mean, there are two provisions given by penal provision, whichever is less they have given. One amount is 2 lakh. I mean, it is maximum is limited to 2 lakhs, we can say. Yeah.
Okay. Whether unspent money, unspent CSR amount pertaining to previous years, that is say FY 1920, also to be transferred to specify to the specified under Schedule 7, or it is applicable relevant to the financial year 2021. Please clarify.
Sir, I think it is for all the previous year only. This is what my understanding is. I would request the person who has raised this query to send me an email. I will once again confirm. My understanding is previous years, only previous years. The word is not previous year. Since it is previous years, I think it is for the I mean, not only relating to 2021. This is my understanding. I will once again check and confirm if the concerned professional sends me an email.
Okay. Perhaps the last question. Does CSR compliance applicable for the financial year 2021?
Yes, sir, it is applicable, including mandatory transfer of mainly mandatory transfer of unspent amount to unspent CSR account or to the fund specified by the central government under Schedule 7. It is definitely applicable because from 1st of January 2021, latest amendments of CSR has already come into effect. So it is applicable for the current year also.
Yes, sir. So that ends the question session. But dear friends, if you still have some query, as the speaker suggested, you can send by email. He'll be happy to share. And it was a wonderful session taken in a simple way. As I already told in the beginning, it is you have to be very careful in filing regular forms. And as always indicated by the speakers, the penal consequences, the additional fees are now tremendous, and it's a very big burden to the company. Hope we got something like a refresher course from company secretary Shri Mohan Kumar. Thank you very much, sir. In spite of your some physical problem you have managed, we are very thankful to you, sir. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. Thank you very much for the opportunity. Thank you.